It's time for NEC Women's Basketball on the Run. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ralph Ventre, ready to talk NEC Women's Hoops. Let's get right to it. Let's check out where we stand heading into Week 3 of conference play. We're just about one quarter of the way through the conference schedule, and only one unbeaten remains. And guess who that is, folks? Well, it's the Robert Morris Colonials. Coach B has the preseason favorites playing their best ball of the season thus far. The Colonials turned up the defensive intensity once conference play tipped off. 4-0 in the early going. They were 11-0 to start the conference schedule last year. And since Coach B took over, the Colonials are on a remarkable run. Robert Morris has won 36 of its last 40 Northeast Conference contests. I know this is not the right part of the show, but there's only one thing to say about that, and that's stats amazing. As for the rest of the NEC landscape, both Mount St. Mary's and Sacred Heart were off to 3-0 starts, but they failed to make it 4-0. And then there's St. Francis U. The Red Flash have sandwiched pairs of victories around their lone loss. They are 4-1 and only a half game behind Robert Morris. As you may notice, the top 4 teams in the Northeast Conference standings thus far, well, they are the top 4 teams from the preseason coaches poll. Also, we can't forget about NEC newcomer Merrimack. The Warriors have won 3 straight following an 0-2 NEC start. And then there's LIU. The Sharks with 2 wins this past week. Shout out to first-year head coach Renee Haynes picking up her first Northeast Conference wins. Still plenty of more basketball to play, but right now it's the defending champion Robert Morris leading the way. She gets buckets. That would be Central Connecticut senior Ashley Berube. The 6'2" center is coming off of a monster week. 3 starts last week, averaged a little more than 17 points per game, 9 boards per outing, shot better than 50% from the field. She's been a super efficient shooter all year long. In fact, she leads the Northeast Conference in overall field goal percentage at an even .500. And not only does she get buckets, but she gets boards, she's Central's leading rebounder, and she gets blocks. 2.2 block shots per game. That's the second highest average in the NEC. For the season, she's averaging a shade over 13 points per game, more than 7 rebounds per outing. She's scored double figures in all 5 Northeast Conference contests. She's had at least 1 block in every single game this season. She gets blocks. She gets buckets. She's Central Connecticut center Ashley Berube. I'm taking the Twitter time out. Let's take this 30, extend it to a full, and take a look at the tweet sheet. This week's featured tweet comes from Talk Basket. They published a recent story on a current St. Francis Brooklyn assistant coach. Yes, that's right. The Terriers have New York basketball royalty on staff. Alyssa Ewing-James, the niece of former New York Knicks great Patrick Ewing, the current head coach of the Georgetown men's team. Well, anyway, Alyssa, she's in her first season as an assistant coach on Linda Simino's staff. She played collegiately at Binghamton. You may remember Coach Simino came to St. Francis by way of Binghamton. She was an America East Coach of the Year for the Bearcats before landing in Brooklyn Heights. And now she has brought an old friend onto her new staff at SFBK. So welcome to the NEC, Alyssa Ewing-James, New York basketball royalty at St. Francis, Brooklyn. That's amazing, bruh. So what is it this week? Well, back in the opening segment, I briefly mentioned Merrimack, how they've won 3 straight. It's their maiden voyage in the NEC, and so far, so good. But how are the Warriors doing it? Well, it's quite simple. They're shooting the ball really well, and they have the best field goal percentage defense in the conference. That translates to behind the three-point line as well. Merrimack shooting a league best 36% from downtown, meanwhile holding its opponents to only 259 from downtown. The Warriors have given up a league low 69 three-pointers. Meanwhile, they've hit an NEC best 148 triples. They're shooting it well inside and out. They're defending all over the floor. Oh, and they averaged the fewest turnovers per game in the Northeast Conference. The Merrimack Warriors flying high with 3 in a row. Now, stats amazing. We're adding a new wrinkle to the show this week. New wrinkle, but an old familiar face. NEC play-by-play man Craig D'Amico will join us for the remainder of the season with his Craig's Corner segment. So let's go to Craig for his thoughts on Northeast Conference women's hoops.
All right, Ralph, thanks so much. Glad to be a part of the NEC Women's Basketball on the Run podcast. First, let's take a look at the most impressive thing I saw this week in NEC Women's Basketball. Myself and Pam Roker were in Hackensack on Monday night for FDU's big win over Sacred Heart on SNY. What was very impressive was the way the Knights completely dictated the pace of play, frustrating the Pioneers shooting, dominating the glass, making all the big shots when it counted. They had 8 threes in that game. You know, this is a Knights program. 3 straight years they've been the number 8 seed. They're in their first year under head coach Angelika Shamiwa. They started 0-7, but Coach Shamiwa was telling us that this new staff brought new accountability. They weren't happy with practice before the game against NJIT, and so they shuffled things up a little bit. They put 4 new starters in the lineup, they won the game, and the players got the message, both those in the lineup and those that got replaced in the lineup. And the team has won 6 out of the last 9 since. Coach was also telling us about an honest conversation that she had with her point guard, Rachel Niles. Niles was shooting too much, her percentage wasn't that high, so Coach challenged her to penetrate and kick out, find her teammates more, and then take a shot if it was available. Well, she responded as well. 9 assists against LIU as a facilitator, and then stepping up and hitting some big threes in that game against Sacred Heart. So this is a program that's going in the right direction, starting to find the consistency and develop that winning culture. They're 3-2 for the first time since 2013, and you look closer at their 3 wins, they're against some big-name conference opponents. St. Francis Brooklyn, St. Francis U, and of course the win on Monday night against Sacred Heart. Now let's take a look at my NEC Women's Basketball Game of the Week. There are a lot of big matchups this week as Sacred Heart goes on the Pennsylvania road trip to Robert Morris and SFU. We also have Mount St. Mary's taking on St. Francis Brooklyn, a big matchup of guard play. But the matchup I'm focusing on is a rematch from early January as Robert Morris hosts the Merrimack Warriors. A lot of good storylines in this one. You have the NEC's newest member versus one of the most accomplished and, of course, the reigning champions. Back on January the 4th, they met in Massachusetts. Robert Morris had a ridiculous first-half run. They got up by as many as 18, but Merrimack fought back, got within 4 in the final minutes before Robert Morris pulled away late. We have a great matchup inside. 2 Player of the Year candidates going head-to-head. As Nneka Ezebo, who had 18 points and 9 rebounds in that early January matchup, goes one-on-one once again against Denia Davis-Stewart. Sticks 21 points, 13 rebounds and 4 blocks last time against RMU. It's also the number 1 scoring offense of Merrimack, nearly 69 points per game against the traditional number 1 scoring defensive team of Robert Morris. They only allow 58.7 points per game. And of course, how about the history? Robert Morris, 23 straight wins in January since 2017. They're the lone remaining unbeaten atop the NEC standings. We'll see if they can survive the weekend against Merrimack, and then after that against Sacred Heart. That'll just about do it for me. Look forward to being back here next week on the NEC On the Run podcast. Right now, let's send it back to Ralph Ventre in the NEC Front Row Studios.
All right, Craig. I'll certainly be looking forward to that Merrimack-Robert Morris matchup as well. As for now, that's all the time we have here on NEC Women's Basketball on the Run, but we will be back next week. Thank you for watching NEC Front Row. I'm Ralph Ventre. Enjoy this week in NEC WBB.